My name's Cindy Bainbridge, and I'm the CEO of the Mckinleyville Chamber. And I have some of my board here tonight. I have my board chair, Amy Martin, is in the back. My vice chair, Christine Wilfong, she's one of the ones going around gathering the 3x5 cards. I also have Stephanie Graber is here. Courtney Kime, I thought I saw her as well. And then Heather Vina is also here. And then one of my ambassadors, Claudia Johnson, is also in the room. I'd like to thank them for coming and helping with me this evening. The moderator tonight is the League of Women Voters, Humboldt County, and I'd like to introduce Ann Hartline. Once again, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Cindy. And I want to echo Cindy's comments. This is an awesome crowd as a league. We are thrilled to see so many community members out to hear what the candidates have to tell us. All right, so how's that? Is that volume pretty good for everybody? Okay, so as Cindy mentioned, good evening. I'm Ann Hartline with the League of Women Voters of Humboldt County. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight for a live candidates forum with the candidates for 5th District Supervisor. Candidates with us this evening are Steve Madrone, and Ryan Sundberg, incumbent. The League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League never endorses candidates or political parties. We do take positions on issues after extensive study and member consensus. The League is dedicated to providing impartial information about voting and the political process. Membership in the League is open to all citizens 16 years and older. League members are serving tonight as question sorters. I have Debbie Hartridge and Becky Simpson here on my right. Timekeeper Carol Masterson right in front. And our couriers tonight are with the Mckinleyville Chamber of Commerce, Stephanie Graber and Christine Wilfong. Will you raise your hands so they can see you? Awesome. Since the majority of our program tonight will use questions from you, the audience, I urge you to begin writing questions for the candidates on 3x5 cards. Heather Vina and Amy Martin in the back have blank cards available, and Stephanie and Christine will collect your cards when you have written your question. So what I suggest you do is when you have written a question, just kind of put your hand up, and they will come and grab them. We already have lots of questions, which is awesome, but if one occurs to you, please write it down and raise your hand. They can also bring you more cards. Our forum tonight begins with a 1-minute opening statement from each candidate. Opening statements will be followed by the question and answer session in which each candidate will respond to questions from you. So each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. So when you're writing questions, keep in mind questions that can be answered by both candidates. At the end of the question period, each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement. The candidates have drawn lots to determine the order of opening and closing statements, and we will begin with our first opening statement from Ryan Sundberg.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everybody coming tonight. This is a really great crowd for a very beautiful day outside today. And first, I'd like to thank the League for putting this on in the chamber, and also my wife, Kim, who's here tonight, for putting up with me these last 7 years and letting me do this job. So 4 years ago, we were sitting here, we were talking about jobs, and we were talking about public safety. And so today, I'm pleased to tell you that we have a fully staffed sheriff's department here in Mckinleyville. Before, they were coming over from Eureka. Now we have a fully staffed sheriff's department here. And also, I want to let you know that our unemployment rate is 3.4%. We're number 15 in the state of California, and I can't take complete credit for that, but the general direction that our board has given, I think, has contributed to that. One of my personal goals is to work across party lines, and I received the endorsements of Jared Huffman, our congressman, Senator Mike McGuire, and our assemblyman, Jim Wood. So I'm very proud of those endorsements. And then also I was appointed to the Coastal Commission by Governor Brown. So I look forward to your questions tonight. That minute goes by fast.
That's really fast. Thank you, Ryan.
Now, Steve Madrone will give his opening statement.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out tonight to be part of our democracy. It's great to see you all. I've lived here in Humboldt County for 45 years. I have a family of 4 children and 16 grandchildren, and the future matters a lot to me in protecting our health and welfare of our entire community, as well as creating jobs. I've spent my entire 45 years here in Humboldt County working to create living wage jobs, working with heavy equipment operators to train them in the new watershed restoration industry, as well as securing easements to build the Hammond Trail, and also bringing in $20 million to create jobs in the community. As your supervisor, I will continue to reach out to all stakeholders and help our community to be able to work together to create real community solutions. I will work to help create lasting health and wealth for all who live in our communities in the wonderful 5th District and all of Humboldt County. Thank you.
All right. Now, we're going to begin with our question section, and I realize I need to say something else to the audience. I'm not used to having a live audience. I'm used to being on Keat TV, and there's nobody standing there but me. So the way that we need to run this is there's no applause. At the very end, we'll give both candidates a rousing round of applause. But please, let's hold comments and comments from the audience, applause. We'll just keep that non-existent, and that will allow us to have more time for questions and answers from our candidates. Okay, so we will begin with our first question, and we'll start with Ryan Sundberg. So, candidates, what do you think the county's biggest environmental challenges are, and how should the county address them? Ryan Sundberg, please.
So our biggest environmental challenge by far is our cannabis industry here in the black market, and our board has done some big moves to combat the black market in Humboldt County. First of all, we have a permitting system, so if you're a permitted cannabis farm, then you basically have no runoff. You have been through the water board, the Fish and Wildlife, you've moved away from a stream, and you are pretty environmentally sensitive and sustainable at that point. The things we're doing to fight the black market are we've revamped our whole code enforcement system to where we send out $10,000 a day fines to the property owner of a property that we find that is not in the permit system. So if we see them, we have satellite imagery that we have for them, and if they're on there, they're getting a $10,000 a day of fine. We're ramping that up drastically this next year, and I think it's going to make a huge impact on the black market here in Humboldt County.
Steve Madrone, your response, please. Oh, by the way, candidates, if you need me to repeat the question anytime, just ask, please.
Please repeat the question.
You bet. What do you think the county's biggest environmental challenges are, and how should the county address them?
Well, we have a lot of big environmental challenges, and the cannabis industry is certainly one of the top ones. It's on many of our minds right now. And I think that we could do a better job in managing that industry on a lot of different levels. But there are many other environmental issues in terms of protecting our water supply and the way the general plan has created these false promises of development in our floodplains next to our water. But also our forest industry, which has been struggling. There's a huge opportunity for our community to restore our forest, to reduce fire, and to create a lot of jobs in our community. And I'm proud to say that I teach forestry at Humboldt State University to help with that industry change. Additionally, there are a lot of problems with our fishing industry, and that's also where forest restoration, proper land use planning, and appropriate cannabis placement of that industry can protect our water supplies, our forests, and our fisheries.
All right, our next question, and we'll begin with Steve Madrone. The writer asks, I would like to know how you view your role in furthering the work for social equity in our community to ensure a safe and welcoming environment for all.
Social equity is a very important issue. My basic approach to just about anything that I work on is to set a very big table and try and bring all of the stakeholders to that table. I have a very strong belief and experience in the fact that within our community, we have the knowledge, the experience, and the resources to deal with social equity issues. And I am a very strong supporter of welcoming all in our community equally and fairly so that we can all have healthy futures, jobs, and a good future for our children and our grandchildren in this community. And there are many others that need our help to make sure that they receive a fair share in this equity future that we're looking for.
Ryan Sundberg, your response, please.
Can you repeat that question?
I sure can. The writer writes, I would like to know how you view your role in furthering the work for social equity in our community to ensure a safe and welcoming environment for all.
Okay, so yeah, our board is very active in making sure that things are fair. One of the things that just recently came up was racism in Mckinleyville. I'm sure most of you have heard about that. And the Mckinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee took an active role in that, and they've created the Mckinleyville Alliance for Racial Equity, and so I've been supportive of that role as well. And making sure that people feel safe. It was heartbreaking for me. I've lived in Mckinleyville my entire life, and to hear that there was college kids afraid to come to Mckinleyville that were black, I just couldn't believe it, because am I not talking loud enough? I've never heard that before. And so hearing that it's disturbing, and so I let them know is whatever I can do to further the education, to let people know Mckinleyville is a welcoming place, then I'll do it. And so I'll do whatever I can from the board level as well.
All right, before we begin our next question, folks in the back, can you hear? Okay, it's looking good. So if you need louder, just kind of go like this so that we know. Okay. All right. Our next question, and we'll begin with Ryan Sundberg. We are in an affordable housing crisis. What can you share about your ideas for improving affordable housing for working people in this community?
So yeah, that's a good question, because this comes up quite a bit, and it's a huge issue across the state of California, and we feel it here in Humboldt County. Some of you may remember a few years ago, but we did a huge rezoning issue or huge rezoning program in especially Mckinleyville. We've got water and sewer in Mckinleyville, so Mckinleyville got quite a bit of the multifamily rezoning, and it starts with zoning. So you have to have places that are available for people to build affordable multifamily housing, and so that program has gone through. And then also Senator McGuire has a bill that's been passed that's going to I forget the name of the bill, but it's got millions of dollars in there for affordable housing for rural counties like ours, and so I think that's going to make a big difference as well.
All right, Steve Madrone, your response, please.
Well, affordable housing is probably one of the biggest issues in our community on many levels, and what I would do as your supervisor is a couple of things. One, I would make it to where all of the indoor commercial cannabis growing that is taking up so much of the housing in our community would be brought under control. I'm not saying outlaw it, but I am saying that it is taking up a lot of housing. Not only is it taking up a lot of housing space, but in addition to that, it's also increased rents for the rest of the space, because a commercial farmer will pay a landlord more to have that indoor growing. Additionally, I would support Measure V that the voters spoke up very loudly on to protect mobile home residents who are seeing dramatic increases in their rents and things like that. I also would be working towards tiny house villages and other kinds of programs that can allow us to create more affordable housing for all of our community.
All right. For our next question, we'll begin with Steve Madrone. This has to do with incorporation. Mckinleyville is arguably the second or third largest community by population in the county. What is your position regarding Mckinleyville becoming incorporated? Are you in favor of this? Why or why not? And we'll start with Steve Madrone.
I'm supportive of the residents of Mckinleyville deciding on that issue themselves. But in order to decide that issue, we need more information. I tried to get information from the county in regards to what are the total revenues, and what are the total expenses within the McKinleyville Community Service District. It's not available. We don't track that way, and we could easily do so without any expense in doing that. By having that information, the community could have an informed discussion about whether or not this community feels that it wants to incorporate or not. It is also clear to me that a city can run itself far more efficiently than a county can run a city. So I think it's high time we have that discussion and get that information so the community can have that informed meeting and decide for themselves what they'd like to see in their future. It seems to me that there is a state law that does prevent this, but we can change that law, and many communities in California are speaking up and asking for that law to change so that communities like McKinleyville can have a chance to incorporate, fix its roads, and other things. Thank you.
Ryan Sundberg, your response, please.
So Mr. Madrone is correct. There's a state law that says you have to be revenue neutral to the county. And the last 5 places that have incorporated after that law came into effect have went, all of them but one have went bankrupt. I don't want McKinleyville to go bankrupt. So we, we've got general numbers on how much McKinleyville pays in and how much it gets back, and it's pretty close. And so we would need a bunch of new revenue to make anything work. Changing a law for all of California is very difficult. So what I've been focused on is if McKinleyville can't be a city, let's make sure McKinleyville has all of the services. We've got excellent fire service. MCSD does a great job with parks and trails and water service and our library. We've got top-of-the-line services here, and my goal has been to try and make sure that we have really, really good services here in McKinleyville. We had a great event last weekend, and making sure we have all these same kind of community things that any other city would have. So.
All right. Our next question will begin with Ryan Sundberg. This writer asks, will each candidate please tell the name of their top 3 biggest donors and the amount of each donation?
So one of the things that we heard quite a bit about in my last election actually was the amount that people were putting into campaigns, and I agreed with that. So our board a few years ago did campaign finance reform. So the most that any one donor can donate now is $1,500. And so I have, it's really knocked down the amount of money that are in these elections. The last 2 elections have been a lot less expensive, and it's allowed more people to get involved. So you don't just, before you had to have money to be able to run. And so I really like the fact that we did campaign finance reform. My top donors, if there's a whole bunch of them at $1,500, and there's some, a whole bunch at $99, and I'm pretty proud that I have wide-based support. And this question mostly comes up, I think, with cannabis, and I've got people who donated $1,500 that are for it and $1,500 that are against it. And I think they both trust me.
All right, Steve Madrone, your response, please.
My 3 biggest donors are the Central Labor Council of Humboldt County, $1,500, the National Union of Healthcare Workers of Humboldt County, and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Those are my 3 biggest donors. I have not received any money from commercial cannabis farmers of any kind, and I do not anticipate taking any money from any of that. I think that can create a real bias in our work when we're working at the board, and I like to try and keep myself in a position where I can be unbiased. Now, we all end up with conflicts of interest in our lives. That doesn't make us, bad people. But the whole objective with conflicts of interest, and that's the reason for these questions and campaign finance reform, and for us to report who we're getting our money from. So if we are receiving money from a significant industry, it's our obligation in protecting the public trust to recuse ourselves from those decisions and to be able to have a fair and honest representation for the community in that regard.
All right, our next question will start with Steve Madrone. Clam Beach has been designated the most polluted beach in terms of water quality for 2 years now. What can the county do about this?
Well, we had the same problem with Luffenholtz Beach up in Trinidad. It was also on the state list of one of the most polluted from bacterial contamination in the state of California. We have 3 beaches in Humboldt County that got on that top 10 list: Moonstone, Luffenholtz, and Clam Beach. In Trinidad, when we realized we had that problem, I was hired to help form the Trinidad Bay Watershed Council in the community, bringing all the stakeholders to the table to figure out what our problems were and how we might solve those problems. We brought in over $12 million with that council, working with the Rancheria and the city of Trinidad to solve problems in Luffenholtz Creek, and have cleaned up that beach substantially in the last 10 years. We can do the same thing with Strawberry Creek and Patrick's Creek. And this is not regulatory. This is coming in, bringing stakeholders together, identifying our problems, and raising resources to come in and help people repair their septic systems, clean up the sediment coming off the roads, and do a good job working together as a community to clean up Clam Beach.
Ryan Sundberg, your response, please.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with Mr. Madrone. It's it needs to be studied. There's a bunch of ranches up there and houses on old septic systems, and it's obviously the manure and septic is getting into that water system, and there is a ton of kids who play down there, and it's not healthy. And so we definitely need to come together and work with those property owners and get that cleaned up. And I do know there's a study going on, or there's people working on this issue now, and I've been supportive of all that work.
All right. Our next question, we'll start with Ryan Sundberg. What will you do to encourage and support CERT in this area, CERT being Community Emergency Response Team?
So most of that's done through the sheriff's office, but we have we've got the Red Cross here in McKinleyville. We've got, I know the tribes have been really involved in creating shelter space and keeping storage for cots and water and that kind of thing. One of the things I did is go back to Virginia, and we went and did the National Institute of Emergency Management with the federal government. So it took a week, and we sat back there and learned all about what to do in case of an emergency. And one of the main things that I learned was, as a public official and a supervisor, our best role is to make sure that they have money. The rest of it, we need to stay out of the way, because there's trained professionals that do the hard work and really get out there, and we need to get out of their way. And if they need something, we go get it for them. And I'm usually pretty good at that.
Steve Madrone, your response, please.
Well, it is all about community, isn't it? And we have an incredible community here in Humboldt County, and we see that when disasters happen, when problems happen, whether it's fire or flood or windstorms, which we get around here with trees blowing down, earthquakes, tsunamis. We haven't had one recently, but it's nice to see we now have the tsunami warning system in place here locally. So really it's about community. And as your supervisor, I would work together with the community response teams, the sheriffs, the fire departments, and others to make sure that we're prepared. I think all of us need to be doing more of this at our own homes, in our neighborhoods, and creating lists with each other for phone numbers, contact information. So it really starts with our own families, and then moves out to the neighborhood, and then it moves out to the larger community through the CERT process and things like that, to be prepared for things that are going to come. And I know that we can do that here in Humboldt County.
Okay, our next question, we'll start with Steve Madrone. How will you help a public process regarding the proposed 101 interchange to the Trinidad Rancheria at Cherry Heights Casino?
Transportation and circulation are very important issues in all of our communities, and they certainly are in the Trinidad, West Haven, Patrick's Point area as well. And what I fully support is a broad, community-based effort where we bring all the stakeholders to the table and we identify what are those transportation and circulation issues in the Trinidad area. And this would include the Rancheria. The Rancheria has plans that they would like to expand their casino area with a motel and a gas station and a mini-mart. But in order to do that, an interchange would be necessary off the highway, as well as additional water and sewer from Mckinleyville, perhaps. So Rather than get a narrow focus on transportation planning from the beginning, I would back up, get the whole community involved, look at what our top issues are. Scenic drives falling into the sea. Mill Creek on Stagecoach Road has been blown out for 4 years. Patrick's Point Drive is falling into the sea. Now, I think we ought to be fixing our current problems before we're trying to expand into something that creates a lot of growth that we're not really prepared for.
Ryan Sundberg, your comments, please.
Yeah, I mean, what I could say is you are highly, highly misinformed on this subject. So this project is not for any kind of growth. It is, the hotel, gas station is probably going to happen way, way before this project. This is a long-term project that's in coordination with HCOG, the Humboldt County Association of Governments, the county. The county knows that Scenic Drive is falling into the ocean. We need a plan on what to do. And so there's going to be a frontage road that comes along with this project that allows people to get to their houses that are on Scenic Drive. And so it requires no water from Mckinleyville. It induces no growth, and it's a necessary piece of infrastructure for a road that is going to be in the ocean. And these projects, I mean, look at Last Chance Grade, which is an emergency, is going to take 30 years. That's how long these projects take to plan. If we don't plan this now, it's going to fall in the ocean, and these people aren't going to be able to get to their houses.
Our next question, we'll begin with Ryan Sundberg. Please address the concerns of citizens about Dollar General in a primarily residential area which needs updated zoning.
So, yeah, I've had quite a few calls about this, and I actually did some research, and I didn't know how that property was zoned or if it had been split off from the larger mobile home park, and found out that it is zoned commercial, and it is it's already been, the parcels had been split already. And so the way it works is that if a property is zoned commercial, which was zoned commercial by I believe in 2002 by the McKinleyville General Plan, they so that's when that decision was made. It was way back in 2002 by the people who worked on that. And it's principally permitted at that point. And so I asked our staff and our attorney if there's anything we could do, and they said that if we tried to stop that project at this point, it would be a taking, and the county would get sued, and we would lose. And so we're just kind of, that decision was made a long time ago. That's all I can say.
Steve Madrone, your response, please.
Well, there certainly is a lot of concern in the community about putting the Dollar General across the street from the high school in an area that is primarily residential. And certainly the community plan did redesignate that parcel back at that time. But as these general plan designations have been made over the last 10 years or more, the community has not been very well informed and received notice about these kinds of changes that are happening. You can talk to many of the neighbors there at Ocean West that didn't get notice about those kinds of changes. And I, for one, think that when we're doing general plan designations and changing zoning, it's imperative on our part to be responsible to those neighbors and those neighborhoods and inform people about the kinds of changes that are being projected and move forward, and to make sure that it's in sync with what the community wants to happen there. I don't think it's a done deal. I would be listening to the community and having that discussion. I certainly would not want to put the county in a position of taking, although that's exactly what the Rancheria intends to do with the interchange, is to take property through condemnation for the interchange there to occur. And those property owners have not agreed to that.
Our next question, we'll start with Steve Madrone. We have had recent turnover in the public defender's office. What qualities are you looking for in the next public defender, and how would you recruit the best candidate?
Well, I would be listening to the rest of the members of the public defender's office, which was what came out after the debacle of the hiring of somebody who wasn't qualified and was really being pushed by one side of the enforcement and legal divisions in the county versus the public defenders who look out for the people who need those services in our community. So I would be doing a lot better job of listening to those into the public defender's office themselves about who they think is one of the most qualified candidates to be able to move forward. It's those kinds of decisions that have created a lot of fiscal issues and problems in our community. We're looking at some serious budget cuts coming down the road in about a year or two. And every time we make a decision like this to hire somebody who's not qualified, it costs us hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more. Money that should be going to roads, to affordable housing, to youth programs, things for our community so the youth can be safe and engaged in summer jobs, things like that. So I would be listening to those who really know who should be hired.
Ryan Sundberg, your comments, please.
So first I'll say, I don't know where you got the information that there's budget cuts coming. We just did a 5-year forecast that doesn't show that. So I don't believe that to be true. And this definitely didn't cost us anywhere around $100,000. But I'll give you my take on this is, you know, when we interviewed for this position, it was clear that there was a division in the public defender's office. And we thought, when we did our interviews, there was one person who had been a public defender before, and we made the best decision unanimously. It wasn't pushed by one side, it was unanimous, that this one person was the best candidate and could bring everybody together. That obviously didn't happen. And we, since then, we've made some big changes, and we have Merrick Rivas, who is doing a great job, and it's actually in closed session tomorrow morning to pick a public defender. And you know, this is an important job. We can take people's life and liberty if they don't have money to get a public defender. So I take it really serious.
All right, let's see. You responded already, Steve?
He was first.
Okay. I told him that I might mess up. It should be easy enough with 2 candidates, but okay, good. Sorry.
It might be easier with more.
Yeah, it's sometimes. Yes. All right. For our next question, we'll begin with Ryan. What can we do as a community? What can we as a community do to help the town center here in Mckinleyville become a reality?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's what I think we could do. So first of all, we need to recognize that this is private property. You know, it's owned by the Pearsons. What they've tried to do in the past is develop that property, and then our Public Works Department said you need to put a sidewalk all the way around the place and give the community a roundabout down by where the church is, and that it just doesn't work. You know, this project has to get phased in, and so I've talked to them and said, you know, let me help you phase this project in, because that's the only way it's going to work. And then also they need to split the property up. It's all one piece of property right now on both sides of Hiller Road, and so they've already started the splitting of the south side of the road. But one thing to remember is the Mckinleyville, or the town center, includes this building that we're in now, and the teen center, the community center, Pearson Park. So we have a lot of it started already, and we have the last piece to go.
Steve Madrone, your response, please.
Well, I do appreciate the work that the county and the Mckinleyville Community Service District have done in this regard, but what I would do is fast-track the town center ordinance process. It's been almost 12 years ago that the community came together in multiple meetings to say, we want a town center. And the town center is not owned by the Pearsons, but it's owned by Ann Pearson. And Ann stated at a public meeting at the Mckinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee, I think it was about 4 months ago, last fall, she said, I certainly hope that the town center gets done, rather than just having strip development along Central. So that's her vision. She wants it. She's the landowner. She would like to see that happen, but she doesn't have the financial resources. Additionally, at that meeting, it was stated that the town center was delayed in order for the cannabis ordinances to be done and the general plan to be done. So the town center got put off for 12 years while these other things were done, and I don't think they were done all that well, but we can talk about that on another question. So I would move the town center ordinance forward and work with Ann Pearson and help make that happen for the community.
All right, for this next question, I'm going to read it exactly the way, this is not worded exactly the way I normally have questions, but this is an English teacher, I just like the way this was worded. So here's the question, we'll start with Steve. Our community wants a forest. What will you do to help us consider all available sites, lead a public process, and help secure funding?
Community forest is very important. We're so lucky here in McKinleyville to have the beaches here and all the parks. I think the Community Service District has done an incredible job in taking on the parks and helping with all the trails, working with the county and the residents. There are two potential community forests that have been described and discussed by the community. One is just east back here beyond what used to be called Calville. Green Diamond owns that property. It's mostly cut down, and now it's maybe 10 to 15-year-old trees. The other one's up at the end of Norton Road. It's part of the Beaupre Estates, and that one would be a much finer community forest. It would cost more to purchase initially, but many of these purchases can be done with our tax dollars, our grants that are out there that could purchase these properties. And the beauty about the Beaupre Estates is that the trees are older, so we could immediately initiate sustainable forestry like Arcata has. There's great examples around the country, and we could put it into a carbon sequestration program where we would receive revenues to pay for operation and maintenance on that property.
Ryan Sundberg, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, so the community forest idea is behind McKinleyville, all the way up to the top of the hill, and it's broken into two pieces. The first piece kind of goes halfway up the hill, and that part would be the community forest. The rest of it, going to the Van Eyck Forest, would be a conservation easement, so nothing could be built up there. I mean, I've heard since I've been in office that people didn't want to see development go all the way to Fieldbrook, and so I've focused on that and have been working with the Trust for Public Land, and they've identified money for this part of it, and it's by the time they're finished, that'll be bigger than City of Arcata's community forest. So it's a great project. We have a buy-in from McKinleyville Community Services District, and our board has offered to help however we can, and I've given tours up there when TPL comes into town, and have been supportive every step of the way and kind of led the charge almost to spark it.
For our next question, we'll begin with Ryan Sundberg. What are the environmental impacts of the local cannabis industry, and what are the best ways to minimize these impacts from a law enforcement perspective and a planning perspective?
So we have to separate illegal from legal. The illegal ones we have all seen the pictures, from dead animals to creeks being dammed. It's just awful. And so I told you a little bit about the county's plan on how we're going to deal with that. We have partners with Fish and Wildlife to the surveillance system the satellite system that we're going to have with the $10,000 a day fines. And then the Sheriff's Department, we gave them 2 extra officers this year through Measure Z to combat the illegal grows. The legal ones I believe, are not, they're a sustainable farm at this point. They have no runoff. They've been through Fish and Wildlife. They've been through the Water Board. And a lot of them, the ones that we really hear complaining, are finding out that that's very difficult to do. And I don't know if you've noticed, but they've filled up our board chambers before because they're not happy with all the steps that they have to go through.
Steve Madrone, your thoughts, please.
The cannabis industry is complex. And what happened was, when 215 passed about 15 years ago, a lot of people came out into the hills and started doing very large, egregious cannabis growing. That was where most of the environmental damage was, not from all the small mom and pop homesteaders who were living in the hills. Now, the roads were a mess, but the county approved those subdivisions, and those roads should have been rebuilt on the ridges rather than running along the creeks. That's something from the past. Additionally, our economy is crashing because of the way we've handled the ordinances with the cannabis industry. Every town in Humboldt County is seeing a 20 to 30% drop in sales tax. And the most egregious growers in the hills were the ones that were incentivized to come down and put their facilities next to our water supplies, right in our backyards, all over around McKinleyville, Fieldbrook, Willow Creek, when the community is saying, we don't want this. So I think we've got some serious problems. We're going to need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to further incentivize good growing, good farming, and not incentivize all the stuff that's creating problems for our communities and our water.
Our next question, we'll start with Steve Madrone. Do you support the proposed ballot measure that would prohibit the Humboldt County Sheriff from entering into joint task force operations with ICE immigration control agents?
You know, the sanctuary movement, the sanctuary ordinance, we are a sanctuary state, whether we agree with it or not. I'm sure this splits our communities, both locally and at the state level. But if we think back to when many people came here in the early years, hundreds of years ago, the United States was a sanctuary for people leaving Europe and religious oppression. So why is it all of a sudden not okay to provide sanctuary to other folks that maybe need that? Many of the people who need this are very hardworking members of our community, and I think that they deserve some consideration. I also think we need to make a way for people to be able to legally live here like we were able, our ancestors who came here. Now, Ryan is lucky enough to be a Native American, and they were here before we came from Europe. But I also think that we have so many important things in our community with crime, and I just don't think it's a wise use of resources to be spending our time dealing with most of these that are nonviolent, non-criminal activities. They just happen to be here undocumented.
Ryan Sundberg, your thoughts, please.
So I spoke to the sheriff to get some more information about this recently, and so SB 54 is the sanctuary law that Governor Brown signed. And what that does is it allows the sheriff to talk to ICE for violent and serious felonies. And what it does is it lets the sheriff call ICE on these serious issues. And just to give you an example, we've only used it twice in the last 2 years. The first one was for a really big drug trafficker. The second one was for a person that had a bunch of child pornography. And so that's the only 2 times it's been used. The sheriff wants to keep that tool. And what he said to me was that if they don't let ICE into the jail for these violent and serious people, they'll go to a house, and then everybody in that house that's undocumented will get arrested and get detained. And so I think the way that it's written now is good, and this new bill could set us back.
Our next question will start with Ryan Sundberg. The county is one of the biggest employers in the area, yet they have gone without a contract for over 6 months. What do you suggest can be done about this? And as a supervisor employer, what would be a livable wage for county employees?
Well, we actually are, we go through negotiations all the time, and sometimes it takes a while to get to an agreement, and I think we're very close right now. And my stance on it is that we try and do our best to pay the highest wages we can, but I am not going to put the county in a hole to do wages. It's just not, I'm pretty fiscally conservative, and if we can afford it, we do it. If we can't, we don't. It's pretty simple. And so we are really transparent with our budgets, what our forecasts are. We started doing a 5-year budget forecast so that we can show what our projected income is going to be. And then we can also say, if we do a 50-cent raise for a couple thousand people, here's how much it'll cost. And then we can see if we can afford it or not. And so we've done that. All of our contracts also have been done on unanimous votes, and so it's I've been with the rest of the board every time on what those increases are.
Steve Madrone, your thoughts, please.
I believe everybody deserves a living wage. It's not always possible. It is true that budgets are always a concern, and I also am a fiscal conservative. My sweetheart can tell you that as far as how we spend money in our home. But as far as the county employees, I think that they deserve these wage increases, as well as the in-home healthcare workers in SEIU and many of the other workers in our community that are not getting a living wage. I think it's interesting that in the budget, the board found a way to give themselves a raise and bring themselves up to a major level in terms of increases. but the home health care workers are working at $10.25 an hour. And a lot of the county employees, their wage increases have not kept pace with the cost of living and things like that. So for me, I think fair is fair, and I've made a campaign promise that if you elect me as your supervisor, I will not take a pay raise. And if the rest of the board votes that in, I'll donate my increased wages to the in-home health care workers because they deserve it first.
Our next question, and we'll begin with Steve Madrone. How do you propose stemming the rising tide of criminal activity in Mckinleyville?
It has to do with a breakdown of all kinds of things in our society: homelessness, addiction, mental health issues. So many of the mental health facilities got shut down. Our facilities in Humboldt County are not adequate. There's no detox centers for children, for teenagers under 18. There's hardly any programs for them. So we have a lot of serious criminal activity that derives from this failure of trying to be able to solve some of these problems. The sheriff says that we spend $80,000 a year putting people into prison and $60,000 a year on homeless. How is that a solution no matter what party you belong to? I would take those funds and bring them up front and start creating programs that help people get back on their feet. Certainly some people may never do that, and maybe we need to be able to put them in jail. But right now we're trying to solve all of our criminal problems by putting people into jail, and then they're released immediately because the jails are overcrowded, and you learn how to be a better criminal when you go to jail, rather than getting some rehab, mental health care, and other things that will really start getting at the underlying problems.
Ryan Sundberg, your thoughts, please.
So some of the programs that we have in Mckinleyville that I think are making a difference is we have what's called the MISS program, the Mobile Intervention Services Team, where a sheriff's officer and a social worker go out together and visit homeless camps, and they figure out what services they need. They don't try to arrest people anymore. They go and find out what services do you qualify for. You know, one of the programs we have is the Transportation Assistance Program, where if someone has family or friends that can take care of them somewhere else, we help them get back. We have a fully staffed sheriff's department in Mckinleyville now. It's been a long time. We used to have 2 officers for the whole northern part of the county, and now we have a full sheriff's department right here, and that makes a big difference. The other thing is community watch. Neighborhood watch is a huge plus for this community. We offer it for free through the sheriff's department, and you know we have to take our community back, and that means watching out for each other, and that's it's making a big difference. And so if you don't have community watch, talk to me. We'll get you set up.
Our next question will begin with Ryan Sundberg. What do you see as the potential positive and negative impacts of the incoming social services hub in Mckinleyville?
So there's been a lot of talk about the social services building, but I can give you my take on it. Is this is going to be a children and family center. I know people got really scared and thought it was going to be like Coster Street in Eureka. And one of the reasons it's not built yet is because we asked our staff to go back and work out a deal with the property owner to make sure that any changes to the services that are offered there, so all the homeless and drug services are not coming to Mckinleyville. They're staying in Eureka. All the transient services are staying in Eureka. And so this is going to be a really nice facility. It's going to be children and family, and they're going to help people. And it's one of the things that people need. We need to make sure that people have the services to keep them healthy, keep their families healthy, keep their kids healthy, and we'll have a better community out of it.
Steve Madrone, your thoughts, please.
Well, these issues don't just exist in Eureka. They exist in all of our communities. When the Eureka Devil's Playground, where there were a lot of concentration of problems with a lot of these individuals who are looking for assistance, was taken apart, we suddenly saw an increase in our community here in Mckinleyville, in Trinidad, throughout all of our communities. So we didn't really solve the problem. In fact, we spread it out more, which actually makes the impact even greater on the community. I do agree with creating these services for families and children. But I think that every community needs to be able to look at a wide array of services to be able to deal with the problems that exist in all of our communities. And I believe that we have the will and the ability to come together in our communities and provide those services. I support a dispersed approach. I don't think creating one big concentration in one place, whether it's Mckinleyville or anywhere else, solves our problems. Some of this begins at home. I think every family in our community has been impacted by drug addiction and other things. So a dispersed approach, I think, is the way to go.
Our next question will begin with Steve Madrone. What would you do to improve and expand the county's transportation system and infrastructure for pedestrians and non-motorized transport?
Well, as many of you know, I've been a big supporter of non-motorized transportation for most of my life here in Humboldt County. I jumped in and helped the county complete the Hammond Trail back in the 1980s, 1990s, when the Mad River took out the railroad. So I'm a big supporter of that. I think the work that was done on Central recently to make it safer for bicyclists along Central and pedestrians crossing was a good move forward. I also like the idea of getting the information and having the discussion in the community about incorporation and then figuring out how to remove whatever barriers exist to doing that. Because it would be really nice for Mckinleyville to be able to have its own bus system that went around all of Mckinleyville, and then the county transit system would stop at a transit center, which would increase ridership, reduce pollution, and increase the health and wealth in our community by improving transportation both through mass transit with buses as well as more trails. We're the envy of the rest of the county as far as trails go. We're very lucky here, and the service district has been a big part of helping make that happen.
Ryan Sundberg, your response.
So the Central Avenue project, we ran that through the Mckinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee, and it worked pretty well. I think they have some really good non-motorized transportation features out there, and the crosswalks have been great. I see kids and adults using them all the time. I've also been very active in getting the Annie and Mary Trail out to Blue Lake to connecting this trail to all the way to Eureka. We're in the middle of that, and my work on the Coastal Commission is also part of that. Connecting Clam Beach to Scenic Drive is also is on there. And one of the other things I think that we need to shift our focus to the way that people are going to travel, and especially not how we travel in the future for transportation. Millennials don't get on a bus and just drive or get around. We have different ways to travel, and they need on demand, and that's what they're asking for, and I think we really need to shift the focus to that.
Our next question will begin with Ryan Sundberg. What is your top priority for Measure Z funds?
I've been dealing with it for a while. As you can probably tell, the top priority is always been the sheriff's office. They get the bulk of the money. And I believe that the voters, that was their main issue. When this came up at the Mckinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee for a recommendation to our board, it was because we did not have a sheriff's substation that was functioning. Our sheriffs are coming out of Eureka. There was 2 of them for all of the northern part of our district, and it just was not working for the community. And so they wanted more sheriff's officers, and so the rest of the board members heard that as well for their areas, and I'm glad that we didn't just focus on Mckinleyville, because this problem for sheriffs was throughout the whole county, and through Measure Z we were able to we're almost at full staff for the whole county, but we have I think we have 3 positions left to fill, and then the sheriffs will be at full capacity. It was 38 positions is how many we funded.
Steve Madrone, your thoughts, please.
Measure Z has been good for the community, although Eureka feels like it's paying the lion's share and not getting very much back for it. So there are some issues that are going to have to be worked out throughout the county in order to get Measure Z approved again next year when it runs out. Some sort of equitable approach to that. I do appreciate that it has helped hire a lot of deputies for Mckinleyville and also some of the outlying areas. And I know that Mr. Sundberg has been a big part of helping that to happen. I give him credit for that. But I think that we've got to be able to realize that the reason it's been so hard to fill a lot of these positions, according to Sheriff Hansel, is that the wage rates are so low and the danger out on our streets is so high that it's hard to attract people to fill these positions. So we've got to be able to start dealing with our crime issues to allow our police to feel a little safer, even though that's their job, being out on the streets. So how we try to intersect those things and help our community be safer is a big question, and I think we'll all be dealing with that the next year when we start discussions on Measure Z's renewal.
All right, for our next question, begin with Steve Madrone. If you perceive a conflict of interest, would you recuse yourself from an issue or project as a supervisor?
Conflict of interest happens to all of us. That doesn't make us a bad person. You know, we all have interests in our community. It's a small community. We're going to know people. We're going to be influenced by people. And that just comes with the territory. But the thing of it is that when you folks elect us to be your leaders, to represent you in the community on so many issues, that public trust that you instill in us is so important that I believe very strongly that one needs to recuse themselves from any discussion or any decision about something where they clearly have a financial conflict of interest. Now, when you take office, you're also advised by the council of that community that you should also recuse yourself even if there's a strong appearance of a conflict of interest in order to protect that public trust. So people can feel that you're making decisions that are good for the community, that are not being influenced by connected money interests.
Ryan Sundberg, your thoughts, please.
So whenever there's an appearance of a conflict, I go and talk to our county council. That's what they're there for, is to let us know if this is something we should recuse ourselves on. And every single time that I've been faced with one where I do have a conflict of interest or a strong appearance, I recuse myself. There's no doubt about it.
Our next question, Ryan Sundberg. How do we support our at-risk youth, and how can we do more?
Yeah, so one of the cool things that we just did recently was we got diversion officers, and actually that was through Measure Z. If you haven't noticed already, we need Measure Z to repass. You know, the Measure Z has been really, really helpful to beef up our sheriff's office, to mental health issues, to drug addiction. And so it's going to be coming in November, and we definitely need that to get repassed to be able to keep moving forward this county. But the diversion officers have been great. I actually had a meeting this morning with the superintendent of Mckinleyville Middle School, and they were saying how helpful the diversion officers have been, and it's, you know, basically for at-risk kids and getting right into the school and helping them find a different way and keeping them out of jail and keeping them out of trouble. And then also the youth center, the teen center over here, and I'm actually on the board of directors for the Boys and Girls Club, and this has been a big plus for kids that could be at risk.
Steve Madrone, your ideas, please.
Too much time on their hands. For our youth, what I would be looking for is a lot of the things that I remember not too many years ago with summer jobs. You know, things for the students, the young kids to do in the summer, like there used to be NOVA and CETA programs. Many of those have disappeared. I'm an Eagle Scout, and I take scouting to be one of those magnificent things that keeps, whether it's Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, engages youth in really good activities. The Teen Center has been fantastic. It's time for the skate park to be built here in Mckinleyville and make that happen. So if we can create opportunities for youth to be engaged in healthy activities and have jobs, then many of these problems will go away. Not all of them, by any means, but it's a good step in the right direction towards trying to help our youth to not be at risk, but by providing them with healthy things to do in their spare time.
Our next question, and we'll start with, oh, by the way, I wanted to let the audience know, we're going to go about another 15 minutes in case you didn't know how long this forum went. I'm going to give you guys a second to breathe. They have answered 21 questions. So at rapid fire, you guys are doing a great job of doing your part. Thank you. So we have time for some more questions, but I just wanted to give you that little heads up. So we will start with Steve Madrone. The question is, the traffic on Central Avenue, especially at Bella Vista and Central, is intensifying. Statistics show 18,000 cars a day travel north and south. Are there plans for a roundabout or traffic light in your plan?
In my plan, there are a lot of problems in that area in particular. People are coming off the freeway at freeway speeds, and they hit the top of the hill, there's a flashing light, slow down, and everybody's triggering that flashing light, you know, because people are just going way too fast. So we absolutely need to focus resources on figuring that out. I engaged Caltrans directly when I was doing a lot of the trail planning in the community, and they were working on the Mad River bridges and creating that new pedestrian bicycle section on the bridges. But then they couldn't come up Bella Vista Hill because that was called Project Creep. They know there's a problem, we all know there's a problem, and I have ideas. I've been meeting with the local trails group here locally to try and figure out how we can route pedestrian and bicycle traffic out of that dangerous area and be able to get to that bridge. It may be an appropriate place for a roundabout, but really we need to sit down with the engineers, the neighbors, the community service district, county public works, and figure out what the best solutions are, and I believe we have those resources in our community to do that.
Ryan Sundberg, your thoughts, please.
So a lot of people don't know that there is a project there, and the Caltrans has a full signal at the top of the hill that had been planned, and they basically ran out of funding, and the project has been on hold for a very long time. I don't know if you remember when the road got widened just a little bit going up the hill. That was one small piece of that overall project. And so when the money came available, we decided just to do that. We're actually going to go all the way to the top of the hill with the widening at this year. And my goal is to keep pushing on Caltrans to get a full signal up there. It does need it. It's dangerous. If you try and go to the freeway at a Bella Vista Road, I mean, you're taking your life into your own hands. It's pretty scary. And so we do have a good opportunity right now. SB1, the gas tax, has been a huge infusion of money into Caltrans, and I think we have an opportunity to make another run at it.
Next question, starting with Ryan Sundberg. How do you propose maintaining the oyster farming in Humboldt Bay?
So I only have a minute, but I'll try and make this quick here. So oyster farming almost died in Humboldt County because the Coastal Commission did not renew the project for Coast Seafoods. It was like my second or third meeting with the Coastal Commission, and I went back and worked with the company on a different strategy. I talked to the commissioners, and when it came back, they actually had more production in their proposal, and it passed unanimously at the Coastal Commission. And I think that was a lot of work that I had done with the company, and also building relationships with the other coastal commissioners so that they would trust me that oysters in Humboldt Bay keep the bay cleaner. Those companies out there need clean water to be able to have oysters that you can eat raw. And so they have a huge interest in it, and I believe that that's one of the reasons we have one of the cleanest bays in California.
Steve Madrone, your perspective, please.
Oyster farming is an important part of our community, and I appreciate the work that Ryan did on the Coastal Commission to help keep that in our bay. It's also nice to know that our bay has been getting cleaner over the years. There was a lot of dioxin pollution in the bay from previous mill operations back in the day, before we knew what we know now about that, and other kinds of pollution. And it's a wonderful thing that our bay is getting cleaner, because we've been doing a lot of watershed restoration, and there's been a lot of remediation of some of those bad sites in the bay. The sediments in the bay are now testing cleaner for the most part, most of them are not testing with poisons anymore. And so that's been great to see those improvements happening in our bay. I support that. I support any development, any business that is being responsible to our community and to our environment. And I believe that in this case, that was what was happening, and they were ultimately supported in their operation, and I support that. So.
All right, next question, Steve Madrone, we'll start with you. Are you on board with the offshore wind energy harnessing project as proposed by Redwood Coast Energy Authority?
Yes, I am. I think that we need to be looking at innovative ways to create energy production here in our communities, move away from fossil fuel development and utilization, which is creating a lot of problems with our climate, with our air, and other things. So the more we can look at these innovative ways of doing things, and in the early days when these wind machines were being developed on land in particular, there was problems with a lot of birds being killed. There was some good energy there, but now they've figured that out a lot better by slowing down the blades so that they don't have that bad impact. I think it's something that we need to look at very carefully and make sure that we can support it as a responsible industry that will help us with our energy needs into the future.
Ryan Sundberg, your response?
Oops. I learned something new today. I always wondered why those big, huge blades killed birds. I never knew that. So we actually have two projects going right now through the one of them is on Bear Ridge, and I don't know if people know, but this is like one of the windiest places in the world. And so, yeah, last weekend you probably figured that out. So we have a project going on Bear Ridge, which is a big onshore wind farm, and then we have the one moving forward for offshore. It's about 20 miles out. I've been having meetings with the different contractors that may come in, and then also the operating engineers who are very interested in this project because it will create a lot of high-paying jobs for this area, and then they're continuing jobs too. And so I was part of the Energy Authority. I was on the board when we changed over to community choice aggregation, and that is one of the reasons why we can have these kinds of projects now. And so as long as we don't have to pay a huge amount more for our electricity, I'm really supportive.
All right. I have to put my glasses on for this one. This is hard to read. There is now discussion of allowing dangerous chemicals for industrial use within the floodplains of the Mad River watershed. What are your thoughts on this, please? And we'll start with, pardon me, Ryan Sundberg.
Okay, so yeah, I worked pretty hard. Actually, I think you're probably talking about the one in Glendale, and I worked really hard to make sure that that project did not go forward. And so I was never supportive of the project. And one thing that I can tell you though is there's been a lot of information going around that I think is not correct. One of them was that this project was in a flood zone, and it was not. It's out of the flood zone by 2 feet. And then also that there was like really, really dangerous chemicals. They had removed all those chemicals out of the project. There was 50 gallons of food grade alcohol was the only thing left on there. But regardless, you know, our floodplains and anywhere close to where we get our drinking water is not a good idea. And so I was not supportive of it, and this project will not be coming back either for any of you rumor starters.
Steve Madrone, your thoughts, please.
I am not supportive of putting these kinds of factories like hash labs in our water supply area, and 2 feet above the floodplain sitting on gravel is not protection enough. It's still located in an area where when the river floods, it would remove the gravel from under the building and we could have a problem. There are many other projects. There's one in Willow Creek that the Willow Creek Community Service District and the entire community are also up in arms about. And in both cases, both of these projects came before the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission voted to approve these. That happened because when the general plan update was done, a lot of these properties were redesignated to allow these kinds of things to happen. So what we need to understand is that hasn't gone away. Those general plan changes that happened have given false promise to a lot of developers that they might be able to do these kinds of things near our water supply, and that's just bad planning. It's not sustainable, and it's not protecting our water supply. So I am not supportive of those, but I do support those kinds of facilities if they're placed in the proper location.
All right. Our next question will go to Steve Madrone. What aspects of the Board of Supervisors operate, the way the Board of Supervisors operates is broken, and how would you fix it?
I believe that there is a lot of conflict of interest that occurs, and folks are not separating themselves from those decisions. I think that there's been a lot of mismanagement of departments in the county that are wasting taxpayer dollars, from the public defender debacle in terms of that hiring. There's been a lot of stuff that's come out about the auditor controller's office not being managed very well. These directors of these departments make $150,000 a year, and I think we can do a lot better in the hiring of our department heads. Some of these, like the auditor controller, is something that you'll vote on here in November, or actually in the primary, I guess. So, you know, I think we can do a better job in terms of how we select our department heads, as well as manage our departments to be more efficient. I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to bring in a lot more grant monies, which is something that I have a lot of expertise in, and a track record of 40 years, 400 projects, brought in millions of dollars into the economy, creating living wage jobs, working with people to solve problems.
Ryan Sundberg, your thoughts, please.
Well, I agree. The auditor controller's office is a big worry for me right now. You know, the Board of Supervisors has absolutely not much control over it because it's an elected position, just like we are. And one of the things we did do is we just spent money on basically a management contract with them, and we're going to have a professional CPA go through the auditor's office and find out exactly what's going on. What can we make better? There's been a lot of accusations coming out of there, and we need to get to the bottom of it. So that is definitely a huge concern for me. There's been accusations going back and forth for sexual harassment to hostile work environment, and that is just, it's not good. So I'm definitely hopeful that at the end of this process, we'll be able to give a very good recommendation, and then also we will elect somebody who will run that thing efficiently.
All right. Now, in the interest of time, this is going to be the last question that I'm going to ask, and then we'll go into your closing statements. So for our final question, please tell us about one or more, we'll start with Ryan Sundberg on this. Please tell us about one or more project or idea that you have which would make Humboldt County a better place, which has not been discussed tonight so far.
We've discussed quite a bit tonight.
True enough.
One of the things that I've been working on that hasn't really got out into the public is for economic development. We've been working with our staff to get a position in place to really evaluate all the assets that Mckinleyville and the rest of the county has for jobs, and we want to hire somebody who will go out into the rest of the world and attract people to come to Humboldt County that fit within what we have. The way it's been done before is we just basically do a shotgun approach, and a lot of companies just don't fit in Humboldt County. It takes somebody special who recognizes the beauty of the area, the ruralness, and you know, we've worked quite hard on creating a broadband system here that works, and you know, we have a lot of infrastructure here that can make for a business to thrive here, and so we're hiring a position that'll go out and find these businesses for us. All
right, Steve Madrone, your comments, please.
Well, we haven't talked about economic development very much in Mckinleyville specifically, and the 5th District includes a very big area, almost half the county. But being that we're in Mckinleyville here tonight, I have an economic development plan for Mckinleyville. And that includes taking our Vista Point facility out here on Highway 101 that is completely dysfunctional. You can't even get into it if you're going north. You have to go down to Clam Beach, turn around, and come back in, coming from the north. You can't get into it if you're heading north from the south. And if you're traveling north, you haven't seen the ocean since the Golden Gate Bridge. You come over that hill, that's a $1 million view. That has the potential to be an economic engine for the community. On the south side of Vista Point is a county parcel that I've proposed to build a Vista Point Park in combination with the Vista Point facility so that we could bring in revenues. Doing that would increase development in the airport business park. I would also make sure that the town center gets front and center. And I believe together, Vista Point Park, the airport business park, and town center would create more jobs and economic development in McKinleyville.
All right, we will wrap this up with a 1 minute, I was going to say 1 hour, no, 1 minute closing statement from each of our candidates. And we'll start with Ryan Sundberg.
Well, I just want to thank you guys all for putting up with us for an hour and however long it was. It's very nice of you to come out and hear us on such a beautiful night. So I just want to say that I've been very happy to be your supervisor for the last 7 years. I enjoy this job. One of my favorite parts about it is I'm able to really connect with the different, over time I've gotten a pretty good Rolodex where if there's problems that come up, I know who to call. I can get it fixed really quickly. I think if you ask around, whether it's a pothole that needs to get fixed, whether it's on a county road or not, I could usually get it fixed or get roads paved or get signs up. There's lots of issues that come up, and I really enjoy taking those challenges on and getting them fixed pretty quickly. So I just want to say thank you for letting me be your supervisor, and I would really appreciate your vote on June 5th, and look forward to serving another term for you.
Steve Madrone, your closing statement, please.
I also want to thank you for coming out tonight and spending some of your precious personal time with us. And I want to thank Ryan also. I think that we're at a big turning point in our community in terms of jobs and our futures and our safety in our communities. The Klamath dams are going to be coming down. You know, those agreements have come up and down over the years, but now they finally have raised the money to be able to do that. And that's going to start in about 1.5 years. So I spent some time with the Yurok tribe the other night, who I'm very proud to have been endorsed by. And we have an opportunity. I have expertise that can help the tribes, Hupa, Karuks, and Yurok, as well as local contractors, get a cooperative agreement together with the entity that's going to be bringing the dams down so that we can make sure that the jobs that accrue from that project come into the community. I also would be honored if you would consider voting for me on June 5th. And if you want more information, go to my website, votemadrone.com, and you can find out a whole lot more about me there in terms of what I stand for and what my background is. Thank you for your time.
All right, let's give both candidates a round of applause. Before we close, I would like to just say a couple of things. First, I want to urge all of you out there to go to Voters Edge, which is votersedge.org/CA. Type in your address and you can see your ballot and a wide range of information specific to your voting opportunities. I want to thank the candidates for taking the time from their very hectic schedules to answer the questions of voters. Thank you also for having the dedication to democracy to run for this important office. I want to urge all of you to pick up one of these. This is a free brochure created by League of Women Voters of Humboldt County. It's called Citizen's Guide to County Government. It's chock full of really, really valuable information about our county's elected officials. And finally, I want to thank you all for being here. You've been a fantastic audience. And please vote on June 5th. Power is in your vote. Thank you.